Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back once again to another episode from Sci-Li Gaming. Today, we are going to be discussing the newly released Company of Heroes 2 in a hopefully rather short and concise little review thing. Of course, let's get, single player and theater of war out of the way first, since, as you all may have assumed by this point, we all know that these two modes are probably not the general focus of the game, and a lot of people are generally looking straight to the multiplayer modes. But I think single player is really the best way to kind of show the many problems that the game Company of Heroes 2 does have. Namely that it tries to tell a really gritty story with our Russian main character who is being sentenced probably to death for actions within the Red Army during World War II fighting back against the Germans. And it's really uninspired. I really feel like it might have been a good idea in practice, but especially with the cutscenes, which I'm sure many of you have noticed don't always work very well, with audio being out of place and or the actors themselves, just the models are bad and the acting is bad, and just in general it's a pretty poor display. Not to mention the fact that most of the time it seems the game really wants to kind of force you to do things a certain way, which really, especially in the RTS genre, at least to me, doesn't seem like the best way to go about things. Of course, eventually, as the campaign does open up, you do get to take on different roles, either bashing through enemies with pure force or, going about it in a more delicate fashion, but that really doesn't open up until later in the game. And really the more memorable missions of the campaign are the ones that really allow you to do whatever you want, such as the mission where you are put in control of a team of resistance snipers, or even the mission where you're given a squad or two of infantry and told to kill a single tank in a town. But those missions are really kind of set apart from the others, and the problem with that is most of the campaign just seems really boring, and that really doesn't help the player get into the game much, especially if you're like me and you just generally prefer single player over multiplayer experiences, at least as far as to say in games that aren't in the MMO genre. But moving right along, I think the game does recover rather well, at least in Theater of War, which is kind of a skirmish type of mode, which presents you with several scenarios throughout the years of the war, and basically allows you to do whatever you want to solve the problem at hand. And these come in several flavors. You have the cooperative modes, you have just AI battle kind of modes, as well as the single-player challenge modes. And I really think those kind of lend a decent hand to helping the single-player experience of Company of Heroes 2 really kind of flesh out what it wanted to be, but at the same time, after experiencing how disappointing the single-player campaign was, it's kind of almost a little too little too late, I suppose is the best way to say it. But, I mean, really, I guess to sum up the single-player experience of the game, it's really lackluster, it's really disappointing, and if that's really what you were going to pick up this game for, then I don't think I could, in all honesty, suggest actually picking it up for its $60 price tag. So, if you're playing it for single-player, wait till the price drops, wait till it goes on sale, and then grab it then, is really the best advice I can offer. But of course, we know that, at least as a Company of Heroes game, single player is not why people are buying it, because obviously RTSs in general have always been multiplayer experiences. So, moving right along into the multiplayer modes, Company of Heroes does have its traditional multiplayer roots still in the up to 4-on-4 battles on large maps, which of course consists of capturing different points around the map to gain resources, building your base, and commanding your units around. thankfully, unlike the single-player campaign, this has largely retained a lot of, at least the personality that the first Company of Heroes was made so popular by. And that goes so far as you still have to order your units into cover, even if the pathing AI is at times truly atrocious. And I mean, it really allows you to kind of follow your own road and making whatever units you choose, following whatever upgrade paths fit you the best, and it really opens up a lot of gameplay in terms of replayability, because every game is different, especially since when fighting human counterparts, you can't ever really expect them to do the same things over and over again. And I think that really brings us to probably one of the new gameplay additions that really affects that the most, which is the weather systems. A lot of the new maps have twin variants that allow you to play in winter, which will feature blizzards, which can freeze your units to death, as well as keeping units out of tall, deep snow or whatever that will cause their temperature to drop eventually to the point that will cause them to freeze to death. That said, I think that really, that the winter maps really open up a very interesting gameplay dynamic that really adds a lot to the multiplayer experience. Personally, I think my favorite moment from the game so far was playing against a buddy of mine. I was playing as the Germans, obviously, and he was Russians. I was planning on overpowering them with Panzer IVs, which are medium tanks of the German army, and well, we were fighting across a frozen river in the middle of a blizzard when a stray anti-tank shell slammed into the ice next to my tank, causing the ice to collapse inward and 2 of my panzers out of the 4 of them to sink and kill everyone inside. And I really think, at least in my experience, not only was that disappointing as a commander, but it was, kind of a heads up to the real gameplay possibilities that Company of Heroes 2 has in its multiplayer mode. Watching those tanks sink really kind of showed just the amount of like random tactics that can be used, I suppose you could say. I've done everything at this point from watching those sink. You can build bonfires to keep your men heated through blizzards, and I've used that to attract enemy soldiers into a group of minefields that I've placed. And, stuff like that really adds kind of a personality to each player's playstyle that it really doesn't show up in other RTSs that are similar in nature. And, it really adds a very strategic element. Should I place a bonfire here, put mines around it, and then have infantry hiding off to the side with ambush upgrades so that my enemy can't see them, and so on. And, it really, every battle in that term then becomes a very tense struggle, not only against the environment, which can be used against you, but against the enemy players. I think one thing that players will notice, though, is that maps are perhaps a little bit smaller. They do feature less control points in general than the first game did, which, of course, each control point actually generates more resources than they used to. But in general, I think that really helps kind of focus the fighting in, which is a very good thing. I always felt that Company of Heroes 1 took almost too long. And focusing in all the fighting on fewer points really allows the game's combat and, of course, the graphical presentation, which is phenomenal for those who are wondering, to really shine. Watching combat is a blast. Maneuvering infantry behind tanks to get those rear armor hits is still tense and very, very rewarding. And in general, I guess you could say that in terms of that, it's definitely, in my opinion, an excellent game. One thing that I have noticed that does cause a problem in multiplayer with the lack of as many points that used to exist is basically there are fewer munitions points and fuel points around the map, and really that makes it, since you have to focus fighting around those, that either you'll lose territory elsewhere, or whoever can gain control of these munitions and fuel points around the map the quickest will generally win the match, which seems a bit annoying to me. Of course, with the points that are not focused, you can still build observation posts to increase your fuel and or munitions income from those, but it's not as much as you would get from just having a traditional post that is either a fuel or munition post. And really, when an enemy, of course, gains control of all of the fuel posts or whatever and can hold them against you, and then start spamming tanks, it's really all over but the crying, and that can get frustrating at times. But as far as that goes, I suppose the amount of freedom offered in multiplayer against other players, as well as the kind of the uniqueness of having all of your XP gained in a single match feedback to your commander, which then allows you, of course, to upgrade your abilities and add different kind of little small percent bonuses to your units, the different units that you can recruit, really adds, I guess, kind of a very nice game progression. It also adds a reward for using certain units. A lot of the bonuses are focused around using a specific unit to do a specific thing, like kill 500 of this, and then you gain 2% increased accuracy, or 5% increased health, or 10% increased production rate, which is a very nice thing because it adds a very nice sense of progression. I can understand why some people wouldn't like it, because if you do play the game for a long time, then you might have a bit of an advantage over someone who's just starting. But I think in the end, that's really going to kind of even out as people start picking up the game and really getting into the many things they can offer. And I guess with the same thing goes for other games that have had progression systems like that. You know, it really encourages kind of guerrilla tactics and different tactics to arise, where if you have something that has a 10% health increase, which I don't think is in the game, mind you, but, you know, it'll really encourage me to think outside the box and maybe try and sink your tanks in a frozen river in the middle of the Okal River Valley or whatever may be the case. But despite the fact, I guess, that the game suffers in single player and really doesn't, you know, get to shine until about, you know, 50% of the way through the campaign to kind of show off more of the mechanics, and a few issues with the way the resource system has come along, with fewer points guaranteeing that if one player or a team of players can secure those points and hold them for slightly longer than the other player, then they have a distinct advantage in multiplayer matches. The game really does retain a lot of what made Company of Heroes, I think, very special. And with that, I would say that it's definitely a game worth picking up. And if for those of you that do need a number score, I'm going to have to give it an 8.5 out of 10. And I hope to see you guys soon on the battlefield. Cheers.